Hi, everyone. Happy April Fool's Day. If you live in the West, you might be getting lots of pinches or tricks played on you. One thing I miss from France is the kids used to like tape little fish, cut out fish on us, and that's their like April Fools. Anyway, little French lesson for you all there, cultural lesson. This is episode 224 of Pencils and Lipstick. I'm Kat Caldwell, and yes, I lived in France for about 6 years, had two babies there, so got to go through the toddler years there in France. It was very fun. Anyway, maybe go cut out a fish and tape it to your coworkers' back and see if they know, you can tell them about a little cultural fact. Anyway, this is an interview episode that we're going to have today. We're going to talk to Golden May Editing. All of you out there who are listening are most likely writers. If you're not a writer, maybe you want to be a writer. If you're not a writer and don't want to be a writer, well, welcome, but I'm not sure why you're listening. Anyway, we are going to talk to Golden May Editing because finding a good editor is actually quite difficult. Um, there's lots of people who claim that they are editors, but we don't always know, how they work or what they're going to charge. I have had really great editing done. I have had some really not so great editing done and paid the price for it. So I wanted to have them come on. They work a lot with Louis Jordstad, and I am a good friend of his. They've done a couple workshops with him. So I highly suggest that you guys follow Golden May Editing, also follow Louis, and possibly get into one of their workshops or contact them and see what a relationship, an editing relationship with them might be about. But first, listen to this interview. I think you'll get to know these ladies even deeper, on a deeper level, understand how they edit. They're also writers, so they get that aspect of this business, and see if they are someone that you would really jam with on editing, because that is quite important when you're bringing somebody your book. There are two people in this episode plus me. So I'm going to let us get into it because we cover a lot of ground. Um, Definitely check them out. The links will be in the show notes, as I said. And if you know of somebody looking for an editor, send them this episode. See if this Golden Meat editing is something that is a place that they would like to bring their manuscript or learn more about. I think that this is a nice way to hear personally from editors and get to know a little bit more about the editing process. All right, welcome back, everyone. Today we have an interview session with Golden May Editing, which happens to be two people, Rachel May and Emily Golden. Hi, girls. How are you doing?
Hi.
Hello, we're
So
great. Thanks for having
great.
us.
I'm excited to
Awesome.
talk to you guys. We have a lot to get through, but before we talk about your editing service and how you guys got together to make a business, Rachel, would you tell everyone a little bit about yourself, and then Emily, you next, just a little intro.
Yeah, absolutely. So hi everyone, I'm Rachel. So happy to be here today and I can't wait to chat. But a little bit about me. I'm one half of Golden May, the May half. I am a book coach and editor, and I grew up not really being into books until I got to middle grade. My brother was a huge reader, and I really struggled to find my niche until I found fantasy in middle grade. And after that, it's been like never stopped, just
Yeah.
constant, one book after the other. And when I got to high school, I started to realize like I want to make people feel the way that I feel when I read
Mm,
books, and I want to be a writer. So I started writing in high school, and around that same time, I just realized like I want to do everything book related. I want to do editing. I want to do writing, and I just wanted to live in book world all the
right.
time. But I was also moving out of high school and moving into like a pre-med degree at college, and it was really
That's
difficult
not
to
book
get my
world,
no, it is
Rachel.
not. We had like parent pressure. I love my
Right,
parents, but
right,
they were
right.
like, you can't be a writer, you
Get a
have to be a
practical
doctor.
degree,
Yes,
please.
be a doctor. So I ended up switching my degree in the middle of college, and that was a fun conversation with my parents. But I just realized like this is what I want to do with my life,
Right.
and I want to be in books. So I switched to English literature. I focused everything that I could on learning about books, learning about editing, learning about writing. And then I graduated college and I had a career for a little bit, not really sure how to break into the industry, but I still never stopped writing. And you
Mm,
have ups and downs, you have ebbs and flows. I think everybody who has been writing since they were tired or just writing now knows that it's not constant. So there were
right,
periods where I wasn't sure, is this it? Could I make it? I think that was the
right,
question. Could I do
right.
this? Um, but I found Emily. We met on Twitter as like critique partners to start. We had,
Wow.
I can't remember who tweeted first, but it was a thread about critique partners or beta readers.
Yeah.
And I think Emily, we had both commented. I think Emily DM'd me. Um, and we started learning everything that we could about craft. And that was really powerful for me because as much as I learned in college, I
Hmm.
did not feel like I knew anything about how to write a book.
Interesting.
Like I knew
Interesting.
how to analyze literature. I
Right,
knew
right.
how to
It's different.
understand themes. Like it is
Okay.
different. I feel like writing
Okay.
a book is not something that is taught even in college level writing classes,
Right,
which is what
right.
I was taking.
It's like, write me a nice book report, please,
Yes,
or an analysis.
exactly.
So at that point with the tweet, Emily, where had you come in? Like where, so your
We're
paths crossed at
We're
this
gonna
tweet.
converging.
merge. We'll
Yeah.
merge at the merge at the tweet.
Yeah,
The famous tweet. We have a screenshot of it somewhere.
that's awesome. I
Yeah.
love that.
Back when
So
Twitter was
yeah,
fun because you
I
could meet
know.
people.
I
The
know. That was
heyday of
like
like
the heyday
2018.
of writing Twitter. It really
Yes,
was. Before the
yes.
pandemic, it was the best. I have so many friends, like deeply good friends that I met on the writing Twitter in 2018.
That's so funny.
But yeah, so hi everybody. I am Emily, the golden half of Golden May. And I also have always wanted to be like when I was a kid, I was like making
Yeah.
picture books and like writing children's stories and chapter books and stuff. Um, I even submit like something that was like definitely fan fiction for Little House on the Prairie to like a contest and was disqualified because it was fan fiction. So so like as a kid, I was very much like I'm gonna write books, like I want to write books. I had poetry published in like fourth grade, like the whole
Yeah.
thing. And then high school came and I'm an Enneagram 1. I don't know if anybody knows what that is, but like my whole thing is I like that inner fear of like being a good person and like
Yeah.
having a good impact on the world like totally derailed me in high school because it was like, oh, if you're gonna like be a good person, art is selfish, basically, was kind of
Oof.
the message that I inherited for a while. So I went into environmental science and I worked in climate justice for a while, for like a decade. Studied it in school, worked at the nonprofit, did the whole thing. It really wasn't where I was supposed to be.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so I had a lot of major momentum and projects derail in 2016 for obvious
Mm.
reasons, and that we don't need to go into. But that was when I started writing again because I
We're
was
all
like,
in America.
like
You
Yeah.
I'm
feel the hit you
so,
need.
I just was so just down, depressed, all the things
Mm.
post the 2016 election. And so I started writing fantasy again because that
Okay.
was the last thing I had written in high school. It was like,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna go back to my roots. And so that's what I was doing when I met Rachel. I was looking for critique partners
Okay.
on Rachel in the Twitter thread, and here we are, you
Yeah.
know, 5 years
That's
later.
okay. So you both sort of came to, you're starting to write, like you're writing and you're both writing fantasy.
At the
Yeah.
time,
Yeah,
yeah.
at
Okay.
the
At the
time, yeah.
time.
Hmm.
So it's interesting that so Rachel was studying literature, and I'm sure you had to do a lot of writing, Emily, with like advocacy and just like environmental
Lots
stuff.
of comms
So,
writing. That was my
right.
thing, is I was
Yeah.
like the person who could communicate science to the layperson. Because like
Okay.
all the science people were like way too wonky. So that was my job for in a lot of different roles.
Which we need people like that, right?
Yes, we
We
do.
need those
Uh-huh.
sort of liaisons,
We
but
need more of those people.
probably. So did that did it feel difficult to go from that kind of writing into fantasy fiction writing, or did you feel pretty comfortable going back to
A
writing?
good question. I I think they're very different. They're
Yeah.
very different types of writing. And I had so much to learn. I had never finished a book. Like I'd started a lot of books as a kid and
Mm.
in high school and stuff, but I'd never finished a story and I didn't know anything about story structure or
Yeah.
anything about how to tell a story that had any kind of momentum. Like a lot of my early writing was just people sitting and thinking and
Yes,
nothing
I
really
have a few of those.
happening.
Yeah. Yeah. But it felt
So
felt so deep. I don't know. When you're 18 and you're like, look at me, I'm writing stuff. I don't know.
yeah.
I mean, I think it's interesting because I'm probably a decade and a half older than you guys, but I don't ever remember learning about story structure or what made a
Yeah.
story. Like we analyzed in high school, and I was
Hmm.
not allowed to study this in college because of my parents, you know,
Yep.
like get a real job. But yeah, like what made a story? And I think that's part of the issue, right? You get to the middle, or like, what is the
Hmm.
action that they're supposed to do? It
Mhm.
For me, it wasn't intuitive. So
Yeah.
I'm guessing for you guys, there was a point in which it was no longer like working or intuitive, and you found each other, and you're like, were you just like freaking out together? Like, what do we do?
Basically,
Yeah,
basically. I
yeah.
mean, I mean, I think that that's like one of those. It's one of those things where people are like, well, I read stories, I watch stories, like
Hmm.
I consume stories all the time. I should just know how to do this. Like, I
Yeah.
think that's where a lot of people approach this from. And I think that might be one of the reasons why there historically haven't been a whole lot of resources on how to do this,
Yeah.
is like people just assume that because we're human and we consume stories all the time, we should just innately be able to pump one
Storytelling.
out that works, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and that's just not the case. And I've heard a lot of people who've gone through MFA programs as well who come out the other side. They're like, I still don't know how to tell a story. And so yeah, that was something that we dove into together. We actually
Okay.
read Lisa Cron's Story Genius together,
Yes.
Mhm.
and that was like the
So
spark that lit the
what about
fire.
that was 2018 when that came out? COVID's like a black hole to me.
I know.
I can't even remember
Yeah.
that was 5 years ago, almost six. Whatever. We're not gonna say the numbers anymore. So what about that story? Did it help you guys? Was there a spark with that? Like that's cool that you got to read it together, because I think story structure feels very like ethereal sometimes, where you're just like, I mean, maybe I get it, and then you're like,
Yeah.
I don't get
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, and it was something that I always really struggled with because I'm a pantser and like
Yeah.
it never made sense to me. And I feel like I learned how to write. I mean, in college MLA classes, you learn how to write an
Mm,
outline. So I
yeah.
would outline as best as I could. And then it never worked. And it used to drive me up the wall and I would be so frustrated and I would compare myself to everybody else and Emily in those early days of like I cannot get my brain wrapped around structure because it just rebels. Like I don't
Mm,
want anything to do with this, but I know like I understand that this is supposed to be massive air quotes supposed to be how it works. Like this is supposed to be how you write a good story. So when we dove
okay.
into story structure, or when we dove into learning craft and we started with Story Genius, I think it was a good middle ground between like the plotter and the pantser
Mm,
brain, because that book is so much about the heart of the story. And that was
right.
the first time I had ever heard anything about like a story point or a message. And I think that's it's not the first time I've ever heard about themes, but it was the first time
Mm,
that I had heard about like you start your story, like you build your story knowing what you're trying to say in a clear, specific way. And
yeah.
that like changed the way that I looked at everything. And
Okay.
working through some of the character exercises and some of the
Yeah.
backstory development like helped me put more boundaries around. I don't have to just plot the hell out of a story to make it work. Like I really need to understand the characters first and
Right.
like what's the foundations of this story. There are a couple plotting exercises in that book which were more or less helpful for me that weren't just like a full outline. So that opened my eyes to like, I don't have to write a
Mm,
line by line outline. Like I could do this any which way. And even if the story genius method isn't exactly what I do right now, it did help me learn how scenes tie together. So I think it was
right.
those foundational pieces that I had never heard put in a particular way that were like the foundations of craft that weren't
Mm,
just structure. Because at that
Yeah.
time I was like, I don't want anything to do with structure. I feel like an idiot. I don't like it. But
yeah.
I didn't
Yeah.
realize that there's so much more to craft than
Right.
just structure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
I think it was at that point it was super beneficial for us to have each other. And I think
Yeah.
that was like the first piece that opened our eyes to like, wow, you can level up your skills and like your understanding of these things so much faster and more efficiently when you have other brains. And it's way less
Mhm.
frustrating when you can
Right.
bounce like what you don't understand or what you think you understand and how you're implementing the thing that you're learning uh, off of somebody else.
Yeah.
And so, because I had read Story Genius before and I had found it helpful, but it wasn't until I read it again with Rachel and we like did the exercises together
Right.
and we traded them and we talked about each chapter. And it was like this like really intense study group that we
Yeah.
had that I was just like, oh my God, now I get it. Right. Like
Yes.
just trying to learn something in isolation, I think is a very difficult thing. And so that's something that's carried us through to becoming editors and the community
Yeah.
that we formed and like the way that we push like really finding your people and like working with your people to level up because it's just
Yeah.
really hard to do by yourself.
Yeah.
I think
Impossible.
it is. Yeah, I mean, I guess there are people out there that can, but I think you guys sort of found that golden nugget really of like, oh, this is somebody who I can open up to. I don't have to pretend that I know everything.
Hmm.
I know in other writing classes, I felt very like like I didn't know anything, and so I had to pretend because otherwise, like
Yeah.
everyone else seems to know what's
Yeah.
going on here, and I don't want to be that only idiot. Just I don't know. So definitely not my people.
Yeah.
But what happened then? So you're still trying to write your own books. You hadn't yet decided like Golden May. That's so perfect too. It's like fate, you know. You're like, wait, our names go together really well. Let's so, so I'm sure you're writing and at what point did you guys decide this is something that other people need as well and it's a service that you want to provide to them because those are two very different decisions to make there.
Yeah, I think we were, like, meanwhile in our day jobs, we were, still feeling that
Miserable.
uneasiness. That I know we had that core feeling of like this isn't where we're supposed to be.
Yeah.
So
Right,
we had
yeah.
been talking about that. We had been studying Story Genius and a couple other craft books, and we were just like, oh my gosh, wouldn't it be cool if we could, be whatever we wanted. We could be editors. And then Emily was
Yeah.
like, we should. I think we call it like how we phrased this, like she pretty much just dared us to try.
I did. I was like, what if we did? Everyone's just
Like,
like,
what if we did? And I was like I was like ready to just daydream of like, what if we were editors? And she was like, we should. Why don't
Yeah.
we try? Like, why we should do this. So we did. I mean, we started like talking about like, okay, what if we were editors? What if we, because we were learning so much
Hmm.
that we had never learned. We knew there
Right.
were other writers that didn't understand this information. And we
Right.
knew that like that was something that we wanted to help other people with.
Yeah.
And that we could be in a position where we like were lit up with passion. We wanted to tell better stories. We both like felt so called to be in the industry telling stories that matter. I mean, meanwhile, like also the world, we're still in the midst of 2016 to 2020 where we needed stories, we needed voices, we needed to amplify, um, you know, things needed to be heard, right? So we
Hmm.
were like, we need to make a change. This is
Yeah.
how we can contribute. This is how we can help other people. Like, let's get stories out there. Um, so we started looking for how do we do it? How do we start? And we were looking at, do we want to do, like freelance editing? Do we want to do book coaching, which was like a new thing that we had just heard about? And what's that like? And we started
Right.
to look at book coaching training, and we found one that we liked, and we took it and we did it. And
You did it together?
yeah, we did it together.
That's
We went
fun.
through it same way that we did with Story Genius. We were doing each lesson together. We were doing the exercises. We were swapping, trying to make sure that like we're both understanding the material, and that if we were going to go into business together doing this, that we were
Yeah.
on the same page about how it should be done. And we finished the training, and we were like, yes, this is what we want to do. This is
Okay.
our place. Let's do it. And I think
So,
like one night Emily put together like the brand guide. And the next morning I woke up and like in my inbox was like a brand guide of everything that our business could look like with like fonts and logos and colors.
That's
And then it was like
amazing.
real. It felt so real.
Seems like you guys complement each other very well because you kind of
Yeah.
need like you have two different backgrounds, even if you have like the same goal, you have different work
Yeah.
backgrounds and things to contribute. And like I love how you did the book coaching together because otherwise it can take like all these self-paced courses,
Yeah.
like it can take years and you can always make up excuses, right? So um what what is different though to you guys about book coaching versus book editing? Because I know this is now 2024 and like I think book coaching is more known after COVID, but still I think people are confused about what to expect and how they're different.
Yeah. I think, Emily, do you want to start with this one?
I can. Can you guys hear? I'm gonna just pause this for a second. I'm so sorry. Can you hear the nanny just got here and so
No,
okay.
you're
Okay,
good.
cool.
It's all
I
right.
was like, oh no.
Babies are welcome. I sometimes have
Yeah.
children crawling on the floor being like, just
Okay,
a
good. Some people get with, some people are awesome like you about it. And then at least it's not the dog next door.
Yeah.
always the
Okay.
dog.
Yeah, I can tackle that question. So, okay, so book coaching and editing are, I think there's more of a universal definition now that
Mm,
kind of separates the two. Now that there are more coaches out there and it's more of an understood service. So, I like to think of a coach as like a personal trainer, right? So like if you're gonna run a marathon and you're going to hire a personal trainer, right? They're gonna work with you every week on like what was your progress? What do you need to work on next? What's your diet gonna be, right? Like every step of the way they're kind of there to help you troubleshoot. And then when you're like down about it because you had a really bad run, right? They're there to like hype you up and like walk you through the mindset and like how to approach it
mm,
differently next time. Same thing. This is like you want to write a book. You're like, I have no idea where to start, right? I've
right.
never gotten to that finish line before. And so you hire a book coach to walk you they're next to you during that process
Mm,
of building
okay.
that book. Versus an editor is generally someone who takes your book in its entirety or in big chunks to
Okay.
give you feedback, like overarching feedback of some kind, right? So that could be story level feedback, it could be a line edit, a copy edit, there's lots of different types of editors, but usually they're looking at your manuscript as a whole once you've already done the work to complete it.
Right. That's a
Yeah.
big difference on it.
Yeah.
And there's several types of editing. So what types do you guys focus on for
Okay.
the
So I
editing
think
process?
there's an overlap between book coaching and editing in the fact that not all editors are book coaches, but in
Mm-hmm.
our book coaching work, we edit.
Okay.
And we're doing developmental editing and line
Right.
editing pretty much
Okay.
like mixed together, depending on what stage one of our clients is in and what their, what strengths we need to develop and, what techniques are we learning.
Sure.
But in our work, we're doing like the developmental editing on a ongoing basis, essentially, as we
Mm,
work through pages, we're giving structural feedback and character feedback. And then as that client grows those skills and gets their manuscript very tight, we work on those line editing skills, those prose
okay.
skills, and we're giving continual feedback so that it's like Emily said, like an ongoing growth. It's in practice, and this is where like I feel like the core of who we are is that we so believe that feedback and the ongoing engagement between multiple people is so important to telling a really strong story, that
Okay.
our services are built to continue that conversation like all the
Right.
time. So we don't just provide here's an edit letter with everything you need to do. Go ahead. I think like that, not that there's not value in that, but like let's discuss it, let's practice the skill, let's see the immediate feedback loop, like
Yeah.
let's incorporate the technique we're learning.
Yeah.
And we see tons of growth in a really fast period because we're constantly going back and forth with our clients.
That's interesting that you say it because I think I read the Artful Edit, I believe during COVID
Mm,
where, you're
Mm.
just in between all
yeah.
the Zoom calls and I was floored to realize that that's what editors used to be. They used to be like book coaches. They
Yes.
used
Yeah.
to get send them a couple letters and they'd write them back and tell them, what's going on. And I don't understand where this character is even going. all these things. Like, no one ever wrote a book. I don't want to say no
Mhm.
one, probably almost no one ever wrote a book without someone giving them, like, in the timeline, like
Yeah.
in the moment feedback. And
Yeah.
yet that's what we're doing. We're
Mhm.
just like all by ourselves writing a story, and no wonder half of them don't ever get done because I
Mhm.
mean,
Yeah.
we're all gonna go insane.
Yeah. You mentioned something earlier about like feeling like you knew nothing compared to anyone else in your classes. And I
Mhm.
think there's a really kind of toxic narrative or underlying, and I don't know that's always intentional, but you take that elitism where everyone else feels like they should know or be better than everyone else around them. Not your perspective, but I'm sure that there are people who treat people who know less as lesser. And it
Right.
feeds this narrative that, like, I can't ask questions, I can't mess up, I can't,
Mhm.
I can't do anything. So take that plus how isolated we make every writer feel that they should be able to do it, that they should be able
Right.
to you take those two things and like no wonder that 97% of people give up or that
Right.
like people are working themselves into burnout with no idea how or why and that they feel so embarrassed to ask questions online or that
Hmm.
they have no idea how to study a craft book because they have a fear of failure. Like I think those two things put together are one of the core problems with the industry of like believing that you should be able to do it by yourself and then also believing that like or feeling as if there's no allowance for questions and that
Right.
there is a hierarchy of knowledge
Yeah.
um because in my experience doing this for like 5 years you can write the most beautiful book ever but as soon as you start your next one you're back at square one. Like I just started drafting my second book and I'm like, I don't know how to write a book. What
I was
happened?
literally having that conversation with my alpha reader this morning.
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh, what is plot?"
What is this? Like it's so cyclical. Like the
Yeah.
idea that you end up being like, "Oh, I'm the best in this industry because I know everything." Like it
Yeah.
that's not how it is and I don't think that's how it should be either.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So when, as you guys have set this up, it's been 5 years, you said, since you've
Just
released
four about four and a half
four
probably.
and a
Yeah,
half.
that's insane.
Yeah, I know.
Have you guys developed your sort of your own way of coaching as you've taken all the craft books and all your own experience? And um, do you want to talk a little bit about how you take people from, I don't know, page zero to
Idea to outline.
is
That's the name of our
That's
course.
it?
One
There
of
you
our
go.
courses in our
Name drop
community.
it. Idea to
yeah.
outline. How do we do that? Like, how have you found, like, kind of the sweet spot of how much time it takes or how much effort it might
Mm.
take people, or what has your experience been in the last 4.5 years with that?
Yeah.
I think, yeah, it's a great question. It's evolved a lot over time. I feel like when we first started, we worked a lot off of the Story Genius, and we kind of compare, and we still do. We kind of mix Story Genius concepts with Save the Cat concepts, because that we work a lot on very character, not necessarily character driven stories, but just character centric, like characters
Hmm.
that go through change, right?
Right.
That's the type of story that we work with. So we work with a lot of fantasy and contemporary, historical, sci-fi, that kind of thing. And so we start with the Story Genius kind of character stuff, and then we move into the Save the Cat outlining, which takes the character stuff and kind of gives a structure to what a character arc looks like within a plot, and how
Right.
you can tie those two things together. So we started in this like very craft centric space. And we created this program, which turned into this course, which is now part of our community. That walks people through kind of, okay, what do you want to say in your story? What's your message? Who are you going to say it through? Right? What characters need to learn that lesson, right? And how are your readers going to learn it through them? And then what plot do you need to introduce to push that character on their journey?
Hmm.
And so that's what a lot of our craft resources focus on. But then in working with clients, we realized in we are very different, and we always knew that, right? I'm a deep plotter. Rachel is a deep pantser. Like we're very different in that way. And in working with our clients, we realized that every single one of our clients was very different from us, even like on that Panther
Yeah.
plotter spectrum. And so
Right.
a lot of what we then dove into learning was like, what are the differences in people's processes? Like, okay, we
Yeah.
have these craft tools, but everybody's going to use these differently, right? Like,
Yeah.
there's no path that takes you from step A to step Z to get you to the end of a book that's going to work the same
True.
for any two people. It's just not
Right.
like
Right.
everybody is different and we all have different fears. We have different things that bring us joy, right? I get a lot of joy out of certain parts of the process that Rachel does not, and vice versa. And so in working with our one-on-one clients, we just learned a lot about that. And so we've now incorporated both into our personal, our client to client or client to coach services, as well as our community, um, how to design a process and make these tools work for you.
Interesting. So kind of how to individualize what you guys have set up. They come in and like how to make it work for them, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah,
Because
Yeah.
that's
yeah,
our zone of genius,
it,
as
it it
Rachel would
really
say.
is though, because I know especially during COVID, there was like a study of like um what percentage of people who sign up and pay for your course actually ever go back and log in again. And it's like
Yes.
if you actually want to help people, it's really discouraging to be like, but you paid for the course. Like
Yeah,
come
Yes.
in here. So I like that you have a community, and this idea of like no one's going to approach it the same is it is pretty genius, because I think another toxic idea of this industry is just read Save the Cat and you'll be fine.
yeah.
Like a
Yeah.
friend of mine read Save the Cat and she's like, "Oh my gosh, I'm doing everything wrong." I was like, "No, you're not. First
No,
of
you're
all,
not.
that man had a wife who took care of him. Okay. He was the breadwinner. Like, and kudos, whatever. But like, that's not your life. You have three boys,
Yeah,
you work, like, you cannot even compare your writing to the craft book that you just read,
Yes.
like, or this idea or whatever. So I think it is a bit of a genius idea to do that, and to create and to leave room for people to be individual, right?
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, throughout this process, I also learned that I'm neurodivergent, which I didn't know until 2 years, or I suspected, but like I didn't
Right.
have an actual diagnosis until like 2
Yeah.
years ago. And then that opened my eyes to all sorts of things of like, wow, neurodivergent brains work a lot differently. And like
Yeah.
not just neurodivergent brains, but all brains work a lot differently and all
Right.
bodies work a lot differently and all lives are different and we have different ebbs and flows. And like when you become a parent, as the three of us are, everything changes. And
Everything
then,
changed.
work changes. And
Right.
so we work really hard and like our community and everything that we're doing is to give our writers the tools to learn how to
Mm.
adapt, to like
Okay.
learn how to develop processes that work for them
Mm.
individually without comparing to anyone else. And to we were joking before the call about like deconstructing our entire worldviews, but like
Yes.
that's kind of a lot of the work that we do of
Yeah,
like
Okay.
deconstructing hustle culture
Yeah.
and no longer prescribing to like productivity expectations and taking the pressure off of daily word count goals. I mean, not just to pick on those, but any type of, the world tells you you must produce this amount in this amount of time, and if you're not, you're failing. Like we dive into that because it is
Mm-hmm.
part of the writing process to evaluate what beliefs do you hold that are
Right.
impacting how you can show up to the page,
Right.
and what narratives do you tell yourself that impact the process that you create.
Yeah.
So on top of all the craft, which is still so important to us, and like making craft work for your brain, we also care so much about developing a healthy mindset, strong
Mm-hmm.
foundations of a process, an attitude that can adapt to the ups and downs, the ebbs and flows, to changes in phases of life,
Right.
and harness like each person's unique strengths, um, so that they can finish their book, so they can be proud of it. Like at the
Yeah.
end of
yeah,
the day, we want every single writer in our ecosystem, in our, orbit, to just feel proud of themselves and proud of the work that they do and not worry about external pick me validation. Like we want those writers to pick themselves
Yeah.
every single day. And that's where we've taken our coaching and
I love that.
in our program.
I love that. I don't know if you guys read Claire Taylor's book on the author career, the Enneagram.
No, I haven't. I'll have to
I'm
check it out.
Mm-mm.
butchering this. Reclaim your author career. So she goes through the Enneagram and she talks a lot about just like one thing always stuck out for me. It was like the person on stage teaching in the indie author industry is a certain Enneagram type, and you have to understand that what works for them
Hmm.
is probably not going to work for you unless you're the exact same Enneagram type as them.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's really that turns everything around, right? Because there are 9 difference, and then you have different wings, and then you have just life circumstances, how you grew up, how you see the world, whatever. And I love going to conferences and I love hearing success, like instant success stories. I love that being people's stories. But I always tell my clients, that's a unicorn in a sea of millions of us who want to be writers. So like you might be a unicorn and I will like be your biggest cheerleader if that happens. But the rest of us will probably write our book
Mhm.
and sell it to a couple and then write another and then sell it. And it will be a very slow process, right? Like there's a reason they're on
Yeah.
stage to say, this happened to me in 3 months.
Yeah.
I love it, right? But like I think it's
Yeah.
way more important to be proud of the book, like you said,
Mhm.
because you can't sell a book you're not proud of, right? You're
Yes.
Yeah.
probably not going to sell
There's
it. Like I
yeah.
want to be proud of this. I want to look back. I want to grow as I write, but I also want to look back and say like, yeah, I did my best in that moment,
Yeah.
and Golden May editing can help you do this. So,
Yeah.
um, I did want to talk to you guys about um maybe chatting to the listeners if they are starting to write or they're in that valley of frustration, which we all face. It doesn't matter how many books you write. I feel like maybe not James Patterson. I don't know. That man's
Oh, how
insane.
does he do it? I
I
don't know.
seriously, I just want to like watch it, stalk him for a day and be like,
Probably all
Remember
he
when
does.
only
remember when you were
working?
like remember when you were like, "Oh, Blake Snyder has a wife and like a support system."
Yeah,
Like that's how they do it, is that they
probably.
have a support system
Yes.
that,
Yes.
Brandon that's how Brandon Sanderson does it, is he
Yes.
has a
Yep.
support system. Like,
It's a very big
Absolutely.
support system.
yeah.
He's not doing his own laundry. I will bet $100 he doesn't do his own laundry. And I bet you when the kid is
I don't
hungry,
even think he line edits his own books.
why should he? Like,
He
He has
should.
world building. He has people who keep track of his world building details. Like, there's a
Yeah.
lot of support for that man.
yeah.
Teams. There are
Yes.
teams.
Teams, right? Like there's a lady, I can't remember her name and I'm sorry that I can't, but she writes mysteries and she says that she doesn't have to keep track just like Brandon Sanderson because her fans will like let her know it and she'll be like, yeah, sorry, I guess his eyes were blue in book 1 and now they're brown. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
And like, whatever, what are you gonna do? But they'll like keep track of it. And she runs a retreat because her fans asked for it. I was like, well, of course,
That's great.
we all want to be there someday, right? But
Yeah.
what can you tell writers as they're either starting their first book or finding frustration in their second book? Like, um, what have you seen, I guess, in these years of, I don't want to call them mistakes, but like maybe the things that writers don't quite know or they're not quite clear on that are very obvious to people like the two of you who have read tons of manuscripts. Um, have you found any similarities in what people can work on especially before they go give a full edit? Like, I think that's what most indie writers think. They got to finish it all and then send it off to a full manuscript. I would encourage them to find a community, but everyone's going to do what they're going to do, right? So is there anything that you've seen over and over again that you're like, please, you know, understand this or get help on this before you spend money on an edit that probably isn't going to be the one and only edit for your book?
There's a
Emily,
lot.
you want to go first?
Yeah,
There's a
Emily, you go
lot.
Emily's
first.
like,
Sure.
this is too much. Okay, Bray, you can answer
Uh,
whatever part of that giant question you
yeah.
want.
Well, I think a lot of it depends on, and that we're going to say this all the time, but a lot of it depends on the individual person's circumstances, right? So the first thing I would say is there's more writers out there who have never finished a book than there are writers who have. And I
Mm,
would say to those people, and speaking to the people who haven't yet finished a book, the thing you probably need to work on is that mindset stuff we were talking about,
Okay.
is like what you need to work on yourself, to find your process, to figure out what works for you, to let go of perfectionism, to let go of the pressure, right? Like all of that is the first thing to work on,
Mhm.
because that is the number one barrier to people finishing their books and then getting those books revised and then being confident in their
Right,
books and all of
right.
those things. Like
Yeah,
that,
you gotta finish
I
it.
think to us is more that work, that mindset work and process work is even more important than craft, in my opinion.
Okay.
So that's where I would start. For people who have finished their books, um, it kind of depends on where you want to take it and how you want. Do you have? I'm gonna let Rachel pick it up
Yeah.
from here
Yeah.
because I have thoughts, but like
I
I don't want to just like ramble.
Yeah. And to build off what Emily just said, because I 100% agree, there's something that we say in our community a lot: process without mindset falls apart. So
Okay.
I really think that I completely agree that you can learn craft and feel like it's going to fix you and fix your book, but if you're not working on the mindset at the same
Mhm.
time, it's not going to, you won't see the impact of that. They go
Interesting.
hand in hand.
Okay.
Now on top of that, I've there are a couple things that are jumping out to me. I think a lot of people, um, I really love to work on character with
Mm.
my clients,
Okay.
and I think people who have been in programs might know this or might be in this direction, but people who have not yet finished a book or who are really struggling or have finished a book and maybe not been so much in the writing world, rely on the plot aspect. They kind of
Okay.
like they over focus on the plot at the character expense, and I think it should be the opposite way. I think like
Okay.
when you know your characters so well, when you've developed their backstory, when you understand their goals and what's at stake if they don't achieve their goals and the flaws that they have that are holding them back, I think those are better stories. And that's
Mm.
usually where I see like stories start to crack, stories
Okay.
start to break. Like in most of the people that I work with, coming up with plot ideas is not the easiest part, but is easy. Is like in
Okay.
the grand scope of things, we can brainstorm plot ideas, but if it doesn't merge with the character, like they don't work. So I
Okay.
think I would encourage writers of any stage, and especially if they have finished their book and they are looking to take it to an editor, like what do I do? I would say read through that book and really look at how is your character changing? What
Mm.
are they changing from? So like if they start the book at point A and they end the book at point Z, how have they changed? Why have they changed? And what does their change show to the reader? Like what message are we showing the reader by their arc of change?
Yeah.
Um, and I think understanding like the fundamentals of character arcs and how that ties into the development of plot was a huge eye opener to me.
Right.
Because
Right.
I
Yeah.
always felt the opposite. I always felt like I have to brainstorm all the plot events for my outline. But like
Yeah.
honestly, I didn't know about my characters. But once I knew about my characters and I understood how their arc of change influences the plot, that's story structure right there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's those two
So
things tied together, and they're often taught separately. We
Mhm.
often learn about character as one thing, and then we learn about plot. And if you learn about them in isolation, you're not going to tie them together in the way that makes a cohesive story. And so I know, like, it's such a big topic, and obviously, like, we're just saying go learn about it. And
Yeah.
so if Story Genius is a really good place to start. But we have a archive of blogs that talk
Okay.
about how to tie character and plot together. And we actually have a 7-day free course that you can get
That's
on our
fun.
website. It's called The Magic of Character Arcs. And it's free. It's just like it gives you an email each day with another step and activities to do
Yeah.
to start to think about how you're going to tie your character and your character's arc and the plot together. Um, and so go check those out. But yeah, I totally
Yeah.
agree, Rachel. Like that's where manuscripts start to go off rails.
Yeah. I
Um,
I think so too. I think that has to do with like as you said before, Emily, like we consume stories throughout our entire lives, but we don't really analyze the characters that much, weirdly enough, even in our literature class. And Rachel, you probably
Mhm.
took way more than Emily and I, but my prerequisites had to do it. Like, I don't ever remember analyzing like why the author created this character and what growth they had. It was like the plot and what do you think the author wants you to know about this, or whatever. It's just like, but really, when it comes to the story, it's the main character telling you this story. Like, why are they telling you this? Who are they? And why do you care about them? And I honestly never thought about that until I read Lisa's book. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, she's a genius for a reason.
Yeah, she
Yeah.
is. She is. I just want to address that your actual specific question in terms of like
Yeah.
when to search for a service, because it
Yes.
depends on the type of service that you want to work with.
Okay.
Because I would say if you want to work with a coach, like let's say you were going to hire a trainer for a marathon, right? You're not going to
Hmm.
hire that trainer when you're like ready to go for the marathon, right? Like we're
Right.
not gonna
Right.
like wait until the end. So my advice for folks who are thinking about working with a coach is just do it. Just drop everything that you're doing right now and go hire a coach because it doesn't matter. You don't have to have a finished draft. You don't even need to have a full
Mm.
idea. Like, and obviously like
If you
make sure that
do,
your
yeah,
coaches well, and make sure your coaches are are like
a good
us in the
fit.
sense that they take people
Yeah.
with that. But like if you were going to work with us in our one-on-one coaching programs, we're always telling people like you do not have to finish your draft. You don't even
Okay.
need to have like you can have like 10,000 words written, 0 words written, right? I have one client who's worked with me for several years, and when she first came to me, she just had like random brainstorm lists. She'd never written a book before. She was just like, I
Okay.
have these ideas. I don't know what to do with them.
Yeah.
That's what a coach is there for. They're there to
Okay.
walk you through from wherever you are through the next phase of your journey. If you're going to hire a developmental editor, I would give you the opposite advice. I would say
Okay.
get the book as far as you can by
Okay.
yourself. And what I mean by that, by yourself, I mean like with the resources that are available to you. I don't actually mean by yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Give it like find readers, find friends, like work with other writers on your story, like do some revisions. Having to revise is not a failure, it's part of the process.
Yes.
And so
I
I
love
would
that you
do
say
some
that. Yes.
I would do all the work you can to learn what you can and revise it as much as you can before you send it in for that developmental edit.
Okay.
Too often, I see people pay a lot of money for something that they were just like got it out and then they're like, tell me what to do with it, right?
Mm.
They pay for a developmental edit because they want someone to just give them the answers,
Yeah.
right? And that's not what a developmental edit
Okay.
is. A developmental edit is going to a good one should ask you questions and give you ideas of where to dig deeper and like where to do some more revisions and like where you might tweak your story, but you're going to have to answer those questions. And the more time that you have spent with your story trying to get it where you want it to be before you send it in for that edit, the
Mm.
clearer you are going to be on how you want to answer those questions.
Uh,
So that would be my advice on those two types of
yeah.
services. If you want a coach, go for it right now. That
Yeah.
would be my
Yeah.
And
advice.
and like it can be even if you have a finished draft and you're like maybe a developmental edit is for me, but I honestly don't feel like I could incorporate this all myself or I feel completely lost about this process still. Like that's still what a coach can do. Like
Mm.
we have had plenty of clients bring to us finished manuscripts and be like, I don't know what to do with it. And then we
Yeah.
go through it together and we go
Yeah.
back to those foundations and we were like, are those characters strong? Do we understand how they tie to the plot? Do we know what message we're saying? We like go through that process looking at their finished manuscript so we can determine how are we going to revise it. It's
Yeah.
like the hands-on is very helpful.
Yeah. Especially if you want a real in-depth feedback. So I don't know about you guys, but any developmental edit that I've ever gotten done and any that I do, I tell people I'm assuming, like I will tell you all of my thoughts. Like if this doesn't work or you lost me here or I think, you know, your character needs more development, but you're really paying for me to read the entire thing, tell you what the structure looks like, and you're not paying me to walk you through why it's not working. I will try to tell you as much as possible in the write up and in the hour afterwards, but I'm assuming you think this is like your next stop. You know what I mean? I don't know if you
Yeah.
guys think like that, but it's like, and that's why I pick them very carefully now. as I've done more of like, because I've realized people might think it's their next stop before publication, and really it's like, but if, but, but you have no
Yeah.
arc here. And so you really need to go back, and writers don't want to hear that because we really want to be done with it by that point,
Yeah.
right? And so you have to be very careful, but like, I really think you could make it better if you do this. But it's the coach that would give you that support, right?
Yeah.
That like
Mhm.
ongoing support.
We
Yeah.
used to offer a developmental edit service, and I would say like 4 out of 5 times that people came to us thinking they wanted a developmental edit, they ended up signing with us for one-on-one coaching just because like oftentimes people we just think that like, okay, I finished a draft. The next thing is to
Right.
get a professional eye on it.
That's
And
what I
that's
thought.
there's usually several you will be doing
Yes.
yourself a favor if you
Yes.
allow yourself to have some
All
revisions
right.
and some learning and some development happen between those two steps.
Right. Right. And
Mhm.
so what is the difference between your guys' one-on-one coaching and your community?
Oh, I love this. Okay, so we have these are our two main services, and our program is our like cornerstone
Okay.
product. So let me start there. So our program is called Tenacious Writing. It is everything that a writer would need at any stage in their journey. Whoa, what does that mean? Oh my gosh. So we've taken we have three pillars of this community. It's craft, it's community, and it's mindset. So
Okay.
everything we've talked about on this podcast recording is the central tenets of basically
Okay.
our program, where we provide craft master classes. We provide mindset water coolers and like discussions. We
Mm,
learn about craft while we're discussing how do we implement it into our process. So within our program, we have included resources. We have a
okay.
whole library of these master classes that we've done. I think there's like 40 by now, different
Wow.
craft topics, different mindset topics. Um, we have courses that are also included. There's an entire course on plotting an outline from idea to outline, which we mentioned
Mm-hmm.
earlier. There's a course on developing a sustainable writing routine. There's a course on how to plan a revision and how to execute a revision. Like there's heavy content in this program. And we all have it, organized and taken our writers through like a flow. So when you get into it, you're
Sure.
not just like bombarded with, oh my God, here's all these things. Um, we've designed it to whatever you need at a time, you can jump into it and call on it. Then
Okay.
meanwhile, for the community piece, we have a Slack community where all of our members are in the Slack and we're talking to each other and we're discussing and we're writing together. We have weekly group write togethers where we pop on a Zoom and we spend an hour sprinting with each other with little breaks in
That's fun.
between. Yeah, and so because we really believe like this is so difficult to do in isolation. The
Right.
learning, the mindset, and the writing, like all of it is so difficult to do in isolation. So these are our people. These are where
Yeah.
we've created a safe, inclusive space for anyone to come learn alongside us, go through that uncomfortable work of redoing your fundamental mindset about
Yeah.
hustle culture, like all of that stuff. There's support for
Yeah.
within the community. Um, that's tenacious writing. It's a one-time like it's a one-time fee. You're in it for life.
Oh,
So it's
that's fun.
not,
I love
yeah, it's
those.
yeah, not like
Yeah.
a monthly subscription. You just buy it, you're in
Yeah.
it, and we continually add it. New workshops come all the time, new,
Mhm.
Yeah.
let's
We
talk
designed
topics.
it that way so that because we recognize that writers have very different phases of
Mm,
their life and very different needs at different times. And sometimes we don't write at all. And so we didn't want
yeah.
folks to feel, like you're paying a subscription and you can't take in all the resources because it's an endless number of resources.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and so we wanted it to feel like, okay, you're in and now you can just take what you need at your own pace whenever
Yeah.
you need it. Um, and I just want to say we also do we have some incredible critique partnership
Yes.
program pairings and writing groups. And our writing groups are like my favorite thing because these people
Yeah.
are just, I mean, we have writing groups who've been meeting every month for the last several years.
Wow.
And they are just like such great support for each other. They're learning us alongside each other. We wanted to create a program where people could have the experience that we had with each other, where you just
Yeah.
get real deep and nerd out and talk the same craft language and like help each other find process. So we have a feedback training that people have to do before they can
I
be
like
eligible for
that.
those
Yeah.
programs. Um, and
How to
so
be
it's a very,
kind.
very, yep,
Yeah.
it's a very safe place. We've designed our feedback programs to be very safe. We have people who hadn't gotten feedback in or hadn't shared their work in years because they were so scarred from situations that they had gone through, who are now in thriving feedback relationships, and it's
Good.
like
Yeah.
the best thing
Yay.
ever.
That's awesome.
So we have those, and then people also have access to us. So we have
Okay.
coaching calls, we have opportunities for us to review pieces of people's work. There's always like access to us. There's a weekly
Yeah.
Slack channel where people can ask us questions. We are very available in that space. For me and Rachel, it's like our playground. And that's
It really
another
is.
reason we designed it to be lifetime is like we get to do whatever we want. Like I'm going to try out a new workshop type this month with guided visualizations followed
Oh,
by writing time together so folks can like sink into the emotion of their scenes. And so we're going to try that out. Rachel's had open office hours. We're just like
Yeah.
constantly trying new things out, different workshops, different craft tips. We do study groups. We're going to study Brene Brown's Atlas of the Heart for how it can help
nice.
us write emotions. So it's just a really fun place. There's always new stuff going on. And like we ask for input, we ask for what folks are interested in doing with us, and we make it happen. It's really, really fun. Everyone should come be in it because
I
it's so
know. We
fun.
could talk about it forever. Like it is we really have what is everything a writer would need for their journey? It's in there.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
And
No
yeah,
matter
we
how
want it to
fast or
be.
slow or whatever, or, how
Yeah.
whatever your journey
Yeah.
looks like, it's
Yes.
Yeah.
we have everything you need.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Love
I don't
that.
think I've heard of a community that is that well-rounded, honestly.
It's great. I mean,
Because
that makes me happy. I like that.
yeah.
Our favorite place to be.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
we have that. And then we have one-on-one, which is our separate service, which is what you had asked about earlier. But that is like, okay, you want dedicated time every week with us, go
okay.
get one-on-one. You want like to have us look through, like give you weekly feedback, weekly coaching calls, weekly assignments to really dive into your story together. It's the one-on-one attention. So it's like
Mm,
next level. Let's take everything we've got in the community and support you one step further with our individual attention
okay.
once a week for 6 months. It's a 6-month program with an option to renew as much as you want. So you got us for 6 months. Like, let's get as deep into your story as possible and get you as much progress as possible. And coming out the other side, um, I have to. I have to read you this because one of my clients is offboarding tomorrow. She just finished up a year with me, and she won't mind me quoting this, but she said, "I'm so thankful, happy, blessed, and renewed as a person and a writer to have done coaching with you." Like
Oh,
that's the next level touch, right? Like
yeah.
so program is absolutely amazing. And if you want to take it further, one-on-one is the place for you.
Right, right. Oh, that sounds really lovely, honestly, because I I think that you guys have like nailed it with mindset, craft, community, because too many of us feel like we're going insane or like we can't do
Yeah.
this or whatever it is, and like you've said many times, there's an up and down. Sometimes you're flying high because somebody reviewed it great, and sometimes you're
Yeah.
flying low and they're like, I don't understand your character. And you're like, I don't
Yeah.
know. So I think that's really awesome. We are going to have all the links in the show notes. Probably goldenmayediting.com is the best place to start. We'll have a link
Yep.
to your free little email course, and people can start there if they want to. But thank you guys so much for coming on and talking to us about Golden May editing. It sounds amazing. Your community sounds amazing. So I'm going to encourage everyone to go check you out. But thanks for coming and talking to us about it.
Thank you so much
Thank
for
you
having
so
us. This
much.
was wonderful. What a fun
It's
chat.
amazing.